Hello, and welcome to Budget Commander. On this channel, we'll discuss Magic the Gathering topics with a focus on playing Commander on a budget. We'll cover things like deck building, top cards, deck techs, and more. Let's get started. Hello friends, today we have an Elsha of the Infinite budget deck tech for you. Specifically, this is 2DH, meaning all the cards in the deck are $2 or under, with the exception of the Commander, who can be up to $5. Elsha is a 5 to cast 3/3 Djinn monk with prowess, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, she gets +1/+1 until end of turn. We also, and more importantly, get to look at the top card of our library at any time, and we can cast that card as long as it's a non-creature, non-land card. Additionally, we can cast that card as though it had flash or at instant speed. This is an Artifact Matters deck, so we're going to try to get a bunch of artifacts out onto the battlefield and then capitalize on that effect. Additionally, we're going to try to dig and get as much value out of Elsha as we can. We're going to try to play as many cards off of the top of our deck. We do have some ways of manipulating the top card of our deck or shuffling our library so we get a new look. And that's going to hopefully help us to dig deeper and get more value and hopefully just launch us ahead of our opponents so that they can't keep up with us. As always, we're going to start out by talking about Accelerants, and then those Accelerants are hopefully going to move us into our game plan earlier than our opponents. Next, we'll talk about cards that are going to interfere with our opponents and their game plan, cards that will provide us consistency, and then we'll talk about the lands and our mana base, how we're going to get there. So, Accelerants, we have Wayfarer's Bauble, which is going to allow us to put a land onto the battlefield turn early. It also allows us to shuffle our library, so if Elsha's out, we dig deep as we can, and then we can crack the Wayfarer's Bauble. Renegade Map is the same in that it allows us to shuffle our library after we use it, but it only gets us a land to our hand, and Mycosynth Wellspring also gets us a land to our hand, helping smooth out our colors, getting us the colors we need. Mind Stone, Talisman of Creativity, and Talisman of Conviction are all 2 to cast mana rocks that give us a colorless. The Mind Stone, we can pay a 1 and sacrifice it to draw a card, and then the Talisman of Creativity and Conviction give us blue-red or red-white respectively, and we'll do that at the cost of 1 life to us. So can help us color fix, but cost us a little bit of life. We also have Inspiring Statuary, which makes it so that all of our artifacts essentially turn into mana rocks, allowing us to tap 1 and reduce the cost of an artifact by 1. So it doesn't work for all of our spells, but all of our artifact spells can help us to reduce the cost of our other artifact spells. Then we have Storm the Vault, which is an enchantment that sits on the battlefield, and whenever we deal combat damage to an opponent, we get a treasure, which says we can sacrifice it to add a color, any color mana to our mana pool. But more importantly, if we have 5 or more artifacts, which is really easy to do without dealing combat damage, we're going to be able to transform Storm the Vault into Vault of Catlacan, which can give us any of our colors with a tap, but more importantly, we want it because we can tap it to add a blue for each artifact we can control, or we do control, sorry. This can really catapult us ahead of our opponents, easily tapping for 5 mana at least or more. Then we have Gold Mirror, which taps for a white, Alloy Mirror, which taps for any color, and then Ethereum Sculptor, which reduces the cost of all our artifacts by 1. Foundry Inspector, which also reduces the cost of all our artifacts by 1. Joyous Familiar, a 2/2 flyer that reduces all of the cost of our historic spells by 1. So artifacts, legendaries, and sagas. There aren't any sagas in this deck, so artifacts and legendaries are reduced by 1. Pay attention to that because you can reduce the cost of Elsha from your command zone by 1, including the commander tax. So great mana ramp there. Then get into our game plan. These are just a bunch of artifacts or cards that care about artifacts or are going to help us win. Memnite is a 0 to cast 1/1. Golem's Heart is going to gain us a life anytime any player casts an artifact. Then we have Voltaic Servant, which allows us to untap an artifact at the end of our turn. So it depends on what you need, but it can help us give Pseudo Vigilance, give us a little extra mana. You get to decide. Mirrodin Spy is another one that gives us pseudo-vigilance in that whenever we cast an artifact, we can untap a creature of our own or possibly one of our opponents that we make some kind of a deal with. Pia's Revolution is great because anytime a non-token artifact we control is put into the graveyard, we get to return it to our hand unless an opponent chooses to lose 3 life. We get to choose which opponent that is, so if we keep targeting the same player, we can back them into a corner where they have to let us have that artifact back, giving us a lot of card advantage. Saheeli Sublime Artificer just sits on the table and gives us servos every time we cast a non-creature spell. We can also copy one of our artifacts for the turn if we use her -2 ability. Another one of the cards that you kind of have to decide in the moment what you need, when you need it, but you can get 2 triggers off of Saheeli, assuming she doesn't take any damage. Frogmite and Mirror Enforcer are artifact creatures that have affinity for artifacts, meaning the cost of them is reduced by 1 for each artifact you control. Easy to play these for 0 mana, but you're usually going to have some kind of a cost reduction on them, especially if you have a card like Efficient Construction out, because every time you cast an artifact while that enchantment's on the battlefield, you get a 1/1 Thopter. Great for evasion, gives you a bunch of 1/1 flyers that can hopefully get in, but if not, also gives you a bunch of chump blockers and helps increase your artifact count. Metalwork Colossus is a 10/10, 11 to cast artifact creature, but his cost is reduced by 1 for each non-creature artifact we control. So very easy to play him for a reduced cost or possibly even 0. We also have ways to protect the creatures we care about with Swiftfoot Boots or Whisper Silk Cloak, giving our creature either Hexproof or Shroud, and then making our creature unblockable or giving them haste. We also have Penance, which as long as we have Elsha or Future Sight, which I'll show you later, on the battlefield, doesn't really hurt us. Usually this gives you a disadvantage, a card disadvantage, because what you're doing is you're putting a card from your hand on top of your library, and then you get to prevent a damage from a black or red source. The reason this doesn't hurt us is because with Elsha out, we decide a card that Elsha can cast. And then because we can cast it at flash, it doesn't really matter. And so we're essentially blanketing ourselves from colors black and red. And black and red typically struggle with enchantment removal. So if we're playing a black or red deck, and all of our opponents only are black or red, they don't have green or white, which are typically the best colors at removing enchantments, then we're sitting pretty with this out. They'll have to look for other ways to get rid of either Elsha or Future Sight so that this card doesn't hurt them as badly. Cloud Cover protects any of our permanents, semi-protects them in that if it gets targeted, we can choose to return that card to our hand instead. Gerard, Weatherlight Hero, protects our entire battlefield, or most of our battlefield, because whenever he dies, we can exile him and then return all the artifacts and creatures put into the graveyard that turn to the battlefield. So great way to protect your team from destroy, sacrifice, as well as damage effects. Ways that we're going to win, these are kind of our big plays. Storm Herd is going to give us X11 Pegasus flying creature tokens, where X is equal to our life. Does cost 10, so hopefully we're able to stall off our opponents until we're able to cast this and then just flood the board with a ton of Pegasus or Pegasi. Mirrodin Besieged is a really fun way to win. It's a 3 to cast enchantment. You get to choose Mirrodin or Phyrexian. You're going to choose Phyrexian because at the beginning of your end step, you get to draw a card and then discard a card. And if you have 15 or more artifacts in your graveyard, you just get to choose an opponent to lose the game. So you'll choose the most threatening opponent. So as long as you have 14 artifacts in your graveyard and 1 in hand, you can cast this, and unless somebody has instant speed removal, you can choose somebody to lose the game. Approach of the Second Sun is also great because it lets you win the game if it's the second time you cast it. So you cast it the first time for 7, gains you 7 life, and then you put it 7 cards deep in your library. Then with Elsha or Future Sight out, you dig deeper and cast a bunch of those smaller cards, hopefully cantrips, and maybe by the next turn you are already casting Approach of the Second Sun for the second time, winning you the game, assuming nobody counters that spell. Dramatic Reversal, a card that a lot of people abuse. We aren't trying to abuse it in this deck, we're just using it as a utility card that untaps all of our non-land permanents. You got to decide for yourself when is the right moment with this card. We're going to interfere with our opponent's plans by using cards like Swords to Plowshares, which exiles a creature. Our opponent does gain life equal to that creature's power, but for 1 mana, that's a great trade. Galvanic Blast, we're going to usually want to cast this once we have Metalcraft, which means we have 3 or more artifacts, and if we do, for 1 mana, we get to deal 4 damage to a creature. Otherwise, or 4 damage to a target. Otherwise, we're dealing 2 damage to something. Then we have Grape Shot, the first of several cards with Storm. So let's explain what Storm is. Storm means whenever you cast Grape Shot, or this spell, you get to copy it for each spell you've cast before it this turn. So if you cast 3 spells, and then you cast Grape Shot, you get to deal 4 damage to something. 1 for each card before Grape Shot, and then Grape Shot itself. With Elsha out, or Future Sight, we're going to be able to dig and cast quite a few small spells, and which makes Grape Shot and any of our other Storm cards a really good trade-off. Shrapnel Blast allows us to sacrifice an artifact and deal 5 damage to any target. Comet Storm allows us to remove multiple targets as long as we have the mana to do it. Whip Flare is going to deal 2 damage to each non-artifact creature. So great wipe for our opponents, especially if they're playing those pesky token decks. Time Wipe. Great board wipe allows us to return Elsha or another important creature to our hand and then destroy all creatures, so wipe the board. Winds of Abandon, super good utility. Can be a board wipe or can be targeted removal. You can pay 2 and exile a creature. The controller of that creature could put a basic land from their library onto the battlefield. Or you can overload it, which means you're going to exile all creatures your opponents control, and then they're all going to get a basic land for each card or each creature exiled. So you got to choose the moment. You're probably going to be overloading it, but either way, great trade-off. Displacement Wave is another good board wipe, which allows you to return all non-land permanents with converted mana cost X or less to their owner's hand. You get to choose how much X is depending on how much mana you dump into this guy. Then we have Negate, Dovin's Veto, which counter non-creature spells. Dovin's Veto comes with the added bonus of that it can't be countered itself. Then there's Counterspell, which just counters anything for 2 blue. Same as Stoic Rebuttal, except for you have to have 3 artifacts or more, which is not a problem with this deck. So you're probably just getting an extra counterspell in your deck with it. Generous Gift destroys any permanent and gives the controller of that permanent a 3/3 elephant. And then Rouse Eric can shoot lightning bolts at things for minusing 2 his loyalty. You can also tap and untap permanents with his +1. If you ever get to the point of using his -7, you flip 5 coins and take an extra turn for each heads that you get. So not likely. You're probably using him for his +1 and -2, but great planeswalker in this deck. Navindriel's Disc enters tapped, but we can pay 1 and tap it to destroy all our artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. So big universal board wipe. Also comes on an artifact. Cleansing Nova allows us to choose to destroy all the creatures or choose to destroy all the artifacts and enchantments. Depends on what you want, but great utility there. Temporal Fissure is another Storm card that gives you a big tempo swing. So it says pay 5, return target permanent to its owner's hand. That is a terrible trade in mana, but with Elsha and the ability to cast so many cards off the top of our deck, if you get 3 spells before this, just like Grape Shot, you're going to be able to return 4 permanents. So a 4 for 5 mana, that's a great trade-off. Cards that provide us consistency, we have Ponder, which allows us to rearrange the top, or we can shuffle it if we don't like it. Alchemist's Vial just cantrips us and allows us to sacrifice the artifact to prevent a creature from attacking or blocking. Icarus Wellspring is another artifact. Helps increase our artifact count, but also cantrips. Then we have the Riddlesmith, which allows you need to use to be selective. So you're digging as deep as you can with Elsha, and then you get to a land or another card that you can't play. Use the Riddlesmith by casting an artifact from your hand. You get to draw that card and then discard it if you don't want it, or another card from your hand, and hopefully you get another card that you can continue to dig with off the top. Padine Console of Innovation is a 1/4 for 4 that gives all your artifacts hexproof, but also lets you draw a card off the top of your library at the beginning of your turn if you control the artifact with the highest or tied for highest converted mana cost. That is probably going to be you because you're playing the artifacts deck, but if not, it still gives all your artifacts hexproof. We also have Thoughtcast, which draws you 2 cards. Does cost 5, but it has affinity for artifacts, so most of the time you're going to be just paying the blue and drawing 2 cards. Scrap Trawler is a 3/2 for 3, and whenever the Scrap Trawler or another artifact we control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, we get to return to our hand an artifact from our graveyard with a lesser converted mana cost. So as long as that artifact, actually we do have a couple of artifacts that cost 0, so you'll be able to get something from your graveyard, which is great. Future Sight, here's that enchantment I told you about that's similar to Elsha because it allows you to play the top card of your library. The downside is all your opponents get to see what the top of your library is. The upside is it's not restricted to any certain card types, non-creature, non-land. You can play anything off the top. Mind's Desire, here's another Storm card. You're going to shuffle your library, exile the top card of your library for Mind's Desire, but then in addition to each time you cast a spell before it for Storm, and then until end of turn you can play cards from the top of your library without paying their mana cost. Getting into the lands, we have Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, which we can sacrifice to get any of our colors, Ash Barrens, which comes in for a colorless, but we can also land cycle it for 1, Battlefield Forge, Temple of Triumph, Windscarred Crag, which give us red and white, Meandering River, Prairie Stream, and Tranquil Cove, which give us white and blue, Swiftwater Cliffs gives us blue and red, Command Tower gives us any of our colors, and then Exotic Orchard gives us any of our colors that our opponents can also produce with a land. So could be none of them or could be all of them. Monastery Mystic comes intact but gives us all of our colors. Spire of Industry gives us a colorless, or as long as we control an artifact we can pay 1 and get any one of our colors with the Spire. Halimar Depths comes in tapped and gives us a blue, but it more importantly allows us to rearrange the top of our deck, hopefully smoothing out our plays as well as our draws. Forgotten Cave, Lonely Sandbar, Secluded Steppe all come in tapped and give us red, blue, and white respectively. We can also respectively cycle them for said colors, which allows us to discard them to draw an extra card. Darksteel Citadel, Great Furnace, Seat of Synod all increase our artifact count and can either give us a colorless, red, or blue respectively. Then we have Buried Ruin, which gives us a colorless, but we can also pay 2 and sacrifice it to get any artifact from our graveyard back to our hand. And then Temple of the False God, which as long as we control 5 or more lands, taps for 2 colorless. So it gives us a little ramp. Basics, we have 5 plains, 8 islands, and 4 mountains. That is wrong on the prices there, should say 15 cents each, sorry about that. And then CMC, average CMC was 3.36 for this deck, so moderate. But there were quite a few cost reducers in there, so once you play this you'll get a feel for it and it doesn't quite feel like 3.36. If this deck looks fun to you, if you like playing a bunch of cards in one turn, even if they're little cards with smaller effects, give this deck a go. Otherwise, let me know which commander you'd like to see next. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Peace. Thanks for watching. You can help support this channel by hitting that subscribe button. This will help keep you up to date on content from Budget Commander. If you liked the video, make sure you like the video. Leave me a comment with your thoughts on this topic. And if you think someone else could benefit from this video, feel free to share. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk with you next time.